Mike Tyson is widely regarded as one of the scariest people to have ever lived. This is largely based on his intimidating physical presence and lethal strength. But what makes Tyson truly terrifying is his historical tendency to get really angry. During the 4 decades he has spent in the public spotlight, there have been a few times when Tyson has truly lost his temper, and the results have been pretty hair-raising, to say the least. Rest assured, you do not want to make this guy mad, ever. Sit back, relax, and join us as we take a look at some of the poor fools over the years who have. Lennox Lewis. One of the most headline-generating moments of Mike Tyson rage happened in 2002 and involved his soon-to-be opponent Lennox Lewis. Though roughly the same age as Tyson, Lewis hailed from the United Kingdom and had recently risen to prominence by becoming the undisputed heavyweight champion in 1999. His 2002 matchup with Mike Tyson, the former undisputed heavyweight champion, was one of the most anticipated fights in the history of the sport. The pair were scheduled to face off in Las Vegas on April 6th, but after a very special press conference, the state of Nevada changed its mind, forcing the fight to be relocated to Memphis in June. What happened at this press conference, you may ask? Well, on January 22nd, Tyson and Lennox met at the Hudson Theater in New York. The event was televised and received extensive media coverage due to global interest in the fight. Tyson and his entourage were first to appear on stage. Tyson stood on a raised platform under a spotlight. Next to him, roughly 10 feet away, was an identical platform where Lennox was due to appear. Tyson was supposed to be standing face forward, posing for the cameras, but instead he was facing directly toward the empty platform next to him, anxiously tiptoeing back and forth like a hungry lion awaiting his prey. The very moment Lewis arrived on his platform, Tyson's Kangol cap was off and he was right up in Lewis's face. Both men's entourages stepped in to intervene, but after Tyson threw a left hook at one of Lewis's bodyguards, all hell broke loose. What followed was one of the most famous brawls in boxing history. Media personnel were chomping at the bit, trying to film the action, yelling at each other to get out of the way. There wasn't much to see, however, other than a dizzying swirl of fists and body parts. Amid the mayhem was none other than the president of the World Boxing Council, Jose Sulaiman. Sulaiman claims he hit his head on a table and was momentarily knocked out. He also claims that after he got back up, Mike Tyson threatened to kill him and spat on him. Tyson also bit off a chunk of Lewis's leg while the two were tussling on the floor, which quickly became the biggest headline of the whole affair. The brawl soon dissipated after a few minutes, but Tyson's unhinged fury didn't. He then went to the edge of stage and began sharing his feelings with the world, none of which could be broadcast on FCC airwaves. Tyson offered his opinion on Lennox Lewis's mother, as well as his views on journalist Mark Malinowski, who he made repeated verbal threats at. With the help of security, the situation was eventually resolved without World War III starting. Tyson's representatives later said the brawl happened because of a misunderstanding about face-off procedures. Well, you can say that again. Tyson ended up having to pay Lewis $335,000 for the missing piece of his leg. Both he and Lewis were also sued by Jose Sulaiman for $56 million, and to cap it all off, Tyson ended up losing to Lewis via knockout in the actual fight. Needless to say, it was not a highlight for Mike Tyson, but it was one of the angriest moments we've ever seen from him. Savarese. A couple of years earlier, Tyson had displayed his unhinged anger in another way, a way that was more conducive to actually winning. In fact, it was an example of how an enraged Mike Tyson could be an unstoppable, unbeatable knockout machine. On June 24, 2000, Tyson fought Savarese in one of his first fights after a 9-month absence. The reason for the hiatus, much to the ill fortune of Savarese, was that Tyson had been locked up in prison during much of that time. Since his release a few months earlier, he'd been on a vicious win streak, perhaps venting the frustration that had built up during his incarceration. Tyson's mood was not improved when, upon arriving in the United Kingdom for the fight against Savarese, he was met by protests from locals who did not want Tyson allowed in the country. It's important to mention they had reasons for this, the biggest being that Tyson was convicted of raping a beauty pageant contestant in 1992. This understandably made Tyson unpopular with many in the UK crowd, but their objections ultimately fell on deaf ears. A 10-1 vote by the Glasgow City Council gave Tyson the A-OK to compete in the country. He met Savarese in the ring on June 24th in the Scottish city of Glasgow. Savarese was considered a fringe contender, but had pundits known just how royally pissed off Mike Tyson was, they would have realized Savarese didn't stand a chance. In fact, they might have tried to stop the fight for the good of humanity. 15 seconds after the opening bell, Tyson slammed Savarese's head with a left. Savarese managed to get up for about 15 more seconds. Tyson, possibly sensing weakness, went off in a way that seemed insane even for him. Savarese was hopeless to withstand the pummeling, and the fight was called after just 38 seconds. Even though he'd already decimated Savarese, Tyson was way too in the zone to be distracted by referee John Kyle. Both Savarese and Kyle took some additional punishment before Tyson finally stopped seeing pure red. After this incredibly decisive fight, Tyson did not then return to a normal state of mind. In a now famous post-fight interview, he appeared oblivious to Jim Gray's questions, instead going on a wild tirade about multiple subjects. One important thing Tyson mentioned was his future opponent Lennox Lewis. To Lewis, he said, quote, "I want your heart. I want to eat your children." After seeing Tyson get this mad, Lewis could be forgiven for believing him. Evander Holyfield. Anyone who knows anything about Mike Tyson will be familiar with this one. It is, in fact, probably the single most famous instance of excessive violence in the history of combat sports. On November 9th, 1996, Mike Tyson met Evander Holyfield in the ring for the first time. The fight was given the name Finally, which tells you just how anticipated the matchup was. To the shock of the boxing world, Holyfield managed to beat Tyson against 5-1 odds. It was one of the great upsets in boxing history, and to the apprehensive relief of the world watching, Tyson appeared to take it in stride. "I have the greatest respect for you," he told Holyfield at the post-fight press conference. However, respect is not what history would soon come to associate between these two rivals. On June 28th the following year, Holyfield and Tyson met for a rematch. As before, the event was held at the MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas, the absolute mecca of boxing. Holyfield dominated the opening of the fight, winning the first 2 rounds. Tyson was quickly bloodied from a cut above his right eye. Despite the beating, Tyson mysteriously tried to enter the 3rd round without his mouthpiece. Referee Mills Lane immediately ordered him to put it back in. Everyone assumed this was just an absent-minded mistake by Tyson, but soon enough, many would start to wonder otherwise. Tyson came out stronger in the 3rd round, but nobody remembers that now. That's because with 40 seconds to go in the round, Holyfield got Tyson in a clinch, and Tyson, enraged by his past defeat, enraged after having lost the first 2 rounds, and unhinged for other reasons beyond comprehension, did something that would horrify the world. He took a bite out of Holyfield's ear and spat it out onto the canvas. Holyfield reacted much how you'd expect. Bleeding heavily, he recoiled in shock and began hopping and pacing around the ring in pain. Referee Mills Lane called timeout the moment he saw what had happened, but Tyson, apparently in another one of his zones, continued going after the bleeding Holyfield. Lane had the unenviable task of stepping between the two. After several precarious seconds, Tyson finally seemed to register that the fight had been stopped and he backed off. You'd think Lane would have been relieved at this point, but in truth, the hardest task of all now lay ahead. What was he going to do about what just happened? The MGM Grand Arena hung in suspended animation for several minutes while officials deliberated. The crowd had plenty to keep them entertained though, namely the instant replay on the Jumbotron. Amid a chorus of boos and exclamations, referee Mills Lane eventually decided to allow the fight to continue, but only after consulting with a rep from the Nevada State Athletic Commission and confirming with the ringside physician that Holyfield was able to return to the ring. Lane later said that he had initially wanted to disqualify Tyson right then and there, but opted instead to deduct 2 points from him. Amazingly, Tyson protested this, saying the new shape of Holyfield's ear was the result of a punch. Lane obviously dismissed this absurd claim, gave Tyson a stern warning, and let the fight resume. Even more amazingly, Tyson soon bit Holyfield's ear again while in another clinch. This bite was less severe. It went undetected by officials, and the round ended as normal. However, once Mills Lane realized what had happened, he stopped the fight a second time. Once again, Mike Tyson was really mad. This time he was so mad that that even after biting his opponent in the ear twice and halting the fight, he went after both Holyfield and his trainer, eventually having to be restrained by security. Lane had seen enough. He disqualified Tyson and ended the fight. Fans watched in disbelief as Holyfield swiftly left the building. Announcers spoke in stunned tones about how this was the first disqualification in a title fight for half a century. Tyson's rage continued to be provoked even after this point. He was hit by a water bottle from the stands as he and his entourage made their exit. Tyson responded by entering the stands and expressing his feelings much in the same way as he later would at the Lennox Lewis press conference. Amid graphic gestures and sailor-like monologues, the enraged Tyson was essentially herded out of the building by personnel. For this truly extraordinary performance, Tyson was fined a whopping $3 million plus legal fees. He also lost his boxing license for over a year. Worse still, the event catapulted Tyson's propensity for insane rage to international infamy. He would spend much of the rest of his career defending, with little success, this unforgettable moment. He later blamed it on the fact Holyfield had been headbutting him, which, even if true, hardly justifies cannibalism. But excuse or no excuse, this surely is the most infamous moment of Mike Tyson getting truly furious the world has ever seen. Outro. There are numerous other memorable moments of madness from Mike Tyson, many of which happened outside the ring. After a minor traffic accident in 1998, Tyson punched one man in the face and kicked another in his gentleman's marbles, something a judge later ruled could literally have resulted in death. To his credit, in recent years, Tyson has made tremendous strides in mellowing out. He's spoken more openly about his difficult childhood and has clearly gotten a better overall rein on his temper. But the legacy of the so-called baddest man on the planet and his absolutely terrifying rage will live on in popular lore for many years to come.